So I'm here with Azabua Utukku, or as we say in Zavuma, Gov Ukti, Mulp Avamfu Riora, Lili as a Mugger Ul. And so we're saying something about owls.
Yeah, we were talking about, you'd said there was a linguistic connection
Well, Lilith,
with
for example, in Northern Semitic languages meant one of the meanings was an owl, was a screech owl. And there is some cuneiform references to that was one of the appearances of the Lilin and Lilith. So,
well, it's interesting because there's the sphere of Lilith in the Qliphoth, right, or also called Nahemeth, and then there's Lilith, the in Liber Falcifer too. They just call her Lilith or Lil, I think actually, and so there's that Lilith, and then there's Lilith, the demoness. So, I'm not an expert on Hebrew or anything, but it seems to me like Lilith is more than a name, like a specific name for a specific deity.
And it's also more than just, some psychological structure thing, whatever, because I agree with a lot of the conclusions that the Magical Egypt people do, and they're not refuting that there could be real spiritual beings and stuff like this. They definitely do mention like that there can be, that humans are maybe in contact with something. Of course, their focus is on the technology of things, but you do find like their structure. I don't have any graphics, and those graphics aren't mine. I don't want to. But there is structures in the brain and the body and stuff that do match some of these statues and stuff, particularly the goddess statues. And also, if you've experienced some of these things, like there's been a couple times in my life where I've encountered what I would call, I think Baphomet is a species. I know it comes from actually comes from Mother of Wisdom and and actually traces its way back into Mesopotamia. Okay, that's the word I was trying to remember. Into Mesopotamia with the 1,000 goat mother and all that stuff. But I encountered a couple beings that I would call a Baphomet, and it's like the description is okay, but it goes beyond that for me. Because you know what I mean. Calling the thing, saying it has a goat, is appropriate.
Sure.
It has like a different dimension to it, and that kind of doesn't quite get you there.
I mean, how many have horns? Well, it's interesting to me because the O9A description of Baphomet and depiction is often how I have seen Hecate, who I have also associated, at least in my own practice. I'm not making like a historical claim here, but my personal gnosis is that the O9A deity Baphomet, Hecate, and Kali are like the same deity. It's just a theory, though.
Yeah, there are similarities and differences, and things overlap because different cultures, different things, and people's like, oh, you're using a different language. It's like, oh, it's the same thing. But then again, there are differences per cultures. So the Jungian approach to that, you kind of throw in all the names in this category at once, I think that's maybe a bit too much, but I do understand, like, just as most of what people would call Buddhism is sort of a fragment of the main religious system, as you could call it, and psychology is like a fragment of that.
Yeah, so essentially the way I see it is like the Temple Blacklight talks about forms and essence, and these to me are different forms, different names of the same essence, and the division was caused by the fall of the Tower of Babel, when God, quote unquote, Yahweh, divides the nations.
Oh, and for
Um,
example, like you may not know of this one, but uh, like there was some change in the mythology, and it came because of the rise of the Marduk cult. And one of the changes was the idea was basically actually rather than Marduk fighting Tiamat, there is older versions of the story where that's not the case. Like they're on the same side. And of course, there's also connections in through on the Hindu side. By Hindu, I mean the race, because the term is really something the British came up with. It's not really a term for the
yeah.
religion, although it is like, okay, here's 70,000 religions. That's the word we use for them all.
You,
Uh, but
you just
the
mean it like as opposed to Vedic.
but the they have so originally it seems that the stories that were being written down in the older cuneiform stuff and the Sumerian stuff, they were like on the same side, and eventually kind of got split. And so it kind of started off kind of like the the alternative Jewish tales about Lilith and Samael.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think you can draw a lot of parallels uh between different things, but the reason why I stick with that in particular is because the Temple of the Blacklight has sort of created this system of comparative mythology that I find very useful. Um, I, I don't think it necessarily means that like, you know, uh, these are the most historically accurate versions of these
well,
stories,
in the general
so on and
cultural
so forth.
movement, I would kind of point towards the idea of the them being on the different sides. That makes more sense in what we're using because, like, particularly, um, I mean, like, if you know anything about the history of Christianity, Jesus is four different historical people and a bunch of mythological figures, and they grafted it on some after the Bible, and some they turned into saints, and it kind of ties into that whole something shows up and says, "Nope, all the names are mine now," and that because it's definitely started as a henotheistic myth. There were other entities, but this entity overpowered everybody else and said that these 50 names or whatever it is are mine now.
Well, it's this is the reason why I very much have I mean, especially obviously since I've left the Joy of Satan cult, distanced myself generally from uh I guess what you would call Reconstructionist paganism, because these stories were mostly interpreted by Christians in various
Well, like the idea that
uh
despite the
probably
manuscripts,
influenced ways, which is why so many of these people believe the same thing.
it's like something very basic and some of it's not in English, so you may or whatever language a person speaks, so that may not be as easy as one thinks, but um, something very basic like the 8 seasonal festivals. Those were actually the equinoxes, the solstices, and the points in between. But the Christians came up with holidays very close to this to compete with them, and they retold the story that these ancient groups were like. I mean, it's right there. It's like they're acting like their festivities are to blaspheme them. So you expect them to give you the right dates and the right information about these groups.
Yeah, well, I've read a book called The Dark Side of Christian History, which goes a lot into how much of it was just adapted to the Romans. Just whatever the Romans already currently believed, they just switched around the names and
Which the idea that the almost theory that the whole thing Christianity was like well, the Jews knew people weren't going to accept Judaism. There were a bunch of people who weren't going to accept Judaism, so some of them came up with a religion to market against. I don't think we can quite make that point, but it makes some good points. And you definitely find like the first, didn't they?
No, I don't think that.
I mean,
Sorry,
what?
continue. Oh, I was just saying that's not my position specifically.
Yeah, I don't have that position, but I think it makes good points. But you can find sort of like that's not the case with the evidences, but things aren't what they say. The gospels that they mention are not from the period that they say. Certain there was 10,000 variants. I mean, really, some people saying, "Oh, that's because how strong it was." The general message, it's like there's more variant than there is text.
Yeah, well,
but
gotta find some.
It's like the Didache was written about 160, and since then but there were other opinions, but the first official pope was in 180, and that guy, his tomb, they had edited, they were consciously editing the Bible. It wasn't just they were copying it wrong; they were consciously doing stuff with their idea of the Bible. But it doesn't.
Yeah, well, you know, it was. Sorry.
I don't think it was something. Now, I would say you can more make that point about rabbinical Judaism actually not quite stemming from the Israelite religion, but actually connecting to the priesthoods of Persia and stuff like this, and the Khazarians and stuff like this, and passing on some of their information, filtering it through there, and kind of morphing that. I think you can make the point a lot more strongly, but they were mixing mythologies till they got one that kind of took off when they started Christianity. But I don't think that.
Yeah, I mean,
and
sorry.
I will admit the thing that I just think this whole I mean, people do different things and their own practices, whatever. The thing I do with the seasonals, it's like, yeah, I know I'm arranging anything from dreams to like mythological verses and references, and kind of composing a poem of a myth. And it's like, I know what I'm doing, but I know, for example, I'm not like, yeah, a lot of groups will claim that they're reconstructing how things really were, and like they're like basically just resurrecting an old group. And sometimes if a group translates something, that could be the case, but that's not usually the case. Like Zechariah Sitchin, we all know who Zechariah Sitchin was, right?
Of course.
Now he didn't source things very well, and some of his translations were just way off the thing. Like any of that ancient alien stuff, they're drawing lines on the screen for stuff that isn't there. And like so many of those episodes. So it's half funny, it's half introducing information you may want to interpret differently, but it's like he claims.
Well, and it's like if you don't do that, the problem is if you don't do that, and I see Norse pagans doing this all the time, is if you have no further interpretation of it, which is, 99 times out of 100 going to be through the lens of some kind of new age Christian spiritualism, you're just left with a bunch of fables that you can't really base a worldview around.
Or you're left like a typical tarot reader, and you're just reading a book of correspondence and hoping to memorize enough so you don't have to have the book in hand when you do your readings.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on the tarot racket. I mean, that is the most devalued form of spiritualism out there.
Yeah, that's I mean, there are actual decks that you can use to teach yourself stuff and stuff, but most of them is just art decks, for example. But
I
It's
mean, I believe in divination. It's just like people who are
that your
making a
typical
racket off
use.
of selling readings.
Another guy I had on the channel was really upset about those sort. It's like I understand. I've seen some of those videos recently, and it's like, um, yeah, you want to reach across the screen and smack these idiots with their um, this person is this and some other stuff they're into.
Yeah, well, it's like, and then there's these women that essentially uh use it like OnlyFans and
Yeah,
etc. You know, trying to make cheap few bucks off of these tarot readings, and
and
that's like
some of it's like
99% of what divination is.
yeah,
Those two things.
some of it's just how pretty they think they are, or other people think they are. There's difference of opinions when it comes to some of that stuff, but yeah, a lot of that is um, just like some of the channels online. It's like somebody that doesn't really remember too well the book they read or whatever, but they're a woman and they're showing a little bit of a bra or something, so they get a lot of views. Um, or like when it comes to some decks, like some of the most useless decks out there will be the ones with like all sorts of videos and millions of views on the handful of videos on well, I mean the videos that show up when you search total, but the ones that are actually very useful and like can teach you about plants or teach you about this mythological system or another in detail. Those decks you don't get much realistic videos. I mean, you don't get videos that talk about it in more than a simplistic way.
Yeah, I mean, well, a tarot reading from somebody who has no well, whatever you call it, who's not initiated is essentially just a magic trick.
Yeah. Well, you get that. Yeah, cold reading and hot reading, you can kind of learn from that. But yeah, it's
Yep.
um, because it's like what was it to a lot of there wasn't some church in France where they had like 1400 the 1400s or something. There was like a deck painted on the thing, and sometimes the artist would put stuff that obviously kind of wouldn't agree with the church, but people wouldn't get it. Um, but then it took actually hundreds of years of tarot for it to turn into the fortune telling thing. Before that, it was like there were games people played, and actually probably before that was it conveyed mythological information, not just um, I,
I've met I've met like generational spiritualists and stuff who talk about regular playing cards, like you know, type
oh
you'd
yeah,
use in Vegas or whatever, right? Just playing cards.
you can use stuff. Well, the Mamluk deck is where the whole regular playing card thing came from. It was like three things and all that other stuff. But going back a little bit in the conversation, one of the things, like I totally agree about there has to be a living tradition. It's like, one of the things that happened as the followers of Muhammad spread is there were people that like, even though they didn't have, they had rules or something that supposedly they could follow anywhere. It wasn't like pages of clothes you could wear and food you can eat or not eat like the Bible has. So it was a lot simpler than that, but
Right.
people like they didn't have examples. They had, they had 100,000, a couple 100,000 stories, and they didn't have examples of eating rice, for example. They didn't have examples of wearing certain clothes. When they moved into Persia, they didn't know what to do with it. There were people who actually stayed out of those houses because it wasn't, you weren't in North Africa anymore, so you needed a warmer a house that closed. You didn't want that vent open to the north to catch the cool wind and stuff. Um, so people literally took a while to switch over to sealing their homes for winter and all sorts of stuff
Huh.
because they were so stuck that you couldn't do anything new. And then finally, people, of course, they invented new terminology and stuff like this. But there's still people today that are, stuck on particular clothing and eating styles of particular. You have people eating dates in the middle of winter because they think dates are going to be. It's like, you know, when you fast, break your fast with fruit. That's the main thing. But people are like, oh, it has to be dates. it's better. It's, you know, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I know where you're coming from with that. I live in a kind of, there's a lot of Muslims in my community. We live near a mosque, and not just that, but you see like these shops that sell uh like Hindu trinkets and stuff. And it's interesting because a lot of the I think Bengali uh immigrants are actually Hindu, but they will still do the whole you know, Muslim uh dress with the hijabs and all that.
Well, a lot of stuff you can't tell. The only reason
A
why
lot of times it's a cultural thing.
is the West kind of changed. Like the reference is different. In the Bible, you have this thing: the best a woman could be is like a man, and if she doesn't cover, you beat her or shave her. And you have stuff like that going on versus the other response, and so people actually still follow it once you stop enforcing it by force. But like it just translates, that path sort of just translates over. So that's why you have hundreds of different Sufi orders and whatever, because it's like whatever culture's material culture, they just started a new thing. But some stuff, yeah, some stuff is kind of conflicting. Like you have little amulets and stuff that are the same amulets and stuff that the people in India and stuff always have.
I did want to get just because again, I know we have a time limit.
Yeah.
I did want to go quickly back to the topic of Joy of Satan.
Yeah.
They, for one thing, it's interesting because there's a lot of since we were just talking about Middle Easterners, there's a lot of Middle Easterners in Joy of Satan, which is interesting. Common enemy, I guess, kind of mentality. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. But
well, there's always been stuff going on there. It's like there's stuff people don't know about because they don't actually read the stuff themselves. It's like, did you know Muhammad let people? He said they weren't right or something, but whether you're a soothsayer or whether you claim to be a different prophet or something, you know, as long as you didn't organize a war against him or something like that, he never fought anybody over it. And there were people who would sometimes wander into the places where Muhammad was leading prayer, and with amulets and even statues tied up inside their clothes, and he would just tell them afterwards, "Hey, this is not the place for that. So leave it at home or stop. You know, it's better if you stop it, but at least don't bring it here anymore." But people think like, you know, things different, and so some stuff never stopped, but some stuff got translated over, like the traditions of calling up spirits and stuff like this. They just threw in prophet names and Hussein and some other stuff on top of it, and you know that carried over. But one thing that I like, I'm okay with the term hoodoo as something as whatever, as the symbolic use of roots and correspondences and stuff like this is sort of an American thing. Some people aren't. You have to be black or whatever. But I think one of the things is that you can use whatever type of material you are in whatever area you're at. Like you don't have to wait until you get one of these big old until like you know, as in our last discussion, I showed you, you know, the external temple. So this building is only as a temple. That you know, I did spend money for particular things, whatever. But I have used dry erase markers. I still use chalk or paper or something like that to have some sigil. I definitely don't. I'm not spending $2,000 having something made out of gold to do a ritual. Like some
Yeah,
people,
well, a lot of people forget those books were made for kings. Those medieval grimoires were for literal, actual kings, not just for
and
regular ass people.
priests that were sneaking off and
Yeah,
something unofficial. Um, but yeah, that, because people think you have to use this thing, but and some of the stuff, like you've noticed, some stuff, some rocks and some herbs and stuff have gone way, way up in price recently. Everything's gone up, but some stuff more than others.
yep, yep. I've honestly, I mean, unless it's like a spell that really calls for it, I mostly don't go out and like buy 30 different types of herbs to make an incense. I just ground up some regular ass gas station incense and throw that on the coal instead. Because
Like anybody who yeah, the dollar to $4 thing at the Walmart for the dragon's blood. It's like, who can afford $90 a pound for the dragon's blood? Um, and if you're not doing a video where where you want to specifically show this, and I don't think you should do rituals just for a video or something. Um, but it's cool. It looks like this little pool of blood and stuff, and it has a peculiar smell, but you know, the Walmart imitation is going to be plenty good enough for whatever ritual you need, calls for dragon's blood. I use whatever
yeah, well,
I use whatever I
I get
use whatever herbs that are available for my cooking, and I consider possibilities of symbolism, and that's it. Whatever herbs are for cooking or for ointment or whatever, I just put that. I just symbolically use that.
yeah, there is, I'm not saying there isn't any power or there's no point in those kinds of formalities. I think they're great when you have the time, funds, and convenience to do it. But uh, it can really like halt your progress when every ritual has to like again, yeah, you got to buy 30 different type of herbs to make this incense, and you got to clear out a 9 foot space in your floor to draw a giant circle in salt. You got to clean up all the salt, like I'm just trying to say a lot of this stuff uh
And even if
while I
even
understand
if you're
the
on
decorum.
the side of legal, like some places do allow you to draw on all that in chalk, but see, if you're one of these, first of all, people will make a point of interrupting you. If you ever tried to do to step aside in a public park, you can try to figure out what times and stuff. Some people will try stuff if they figure it out, or you might not be safe because whatever. But I do understand the grimoire process. Like with my seasonal grimoires, I kind of work that in sort of a traditional way, that it works up towards the event. I compose the thing. I decide what I'm going to arrange. It's usually, the candles and all that stuff is usually just what I have on hand. I'm not. I mean, like, I won't even particularly like, if it's a red juice, it's a red juice. Whatever, I'm good to go. Um, the but yeah, I work up to it. But I do have some stuff, and I do understand getting like something particular, but like you used to have to go all over to perform this stuff. Like to get a bloodstone, like the bloodstone's one of the more common ones they call for.
Yeah.
It's like you couldn't get a bloodstone in every town, so you may have to travel or wait for somebody to come through that's selling rocks and stuff. And um, I'm glad I didn't come up with anything that I don't have stuff for. That's um one of the stones that I wanted to get was fire obsidian. And then when I went off to get it, some jewelry company bought the thing off, and that stuff costs like $100 something a minimum for any amount of it, really. And that was
Yeah,
sort of too much. But I do understand how, like, over time, if you use the same object, like you use the same scrying mirror, you use the same stone,
No, for sure, you start to develop a thing with it. And I actually don't own any crystals anymore. I only have my like regular scrying crystal ball, specifically for that reason, because it's this huge racket, like particularly like in the city, to sell these gemstones at metaphysical shops at an extremely inflated price.
Yeah, not only that, the very
And
fact of collecting is like the only reason right now why like every month or two or maybe twice a month or whatever it is, I'll have a dream and there's I'm doing my meditations or dream work and I have a stone and that stone is for that. But if I only had one stone, that would be fine. But there's this collect them all sort of stuff, both with the objects for ritual and the thing. It's like, oh, you're gonna. I understand, like for example, like when you're working with the Goetia, like you're gonna call everyone and over time and all that stuff rather than pick and choose or something. But for the most part, there's this idea that you're just calling on a variety to make your way through a variety just to collect it or something, right?
totally,
And the
I
stones are and
really
stuff are like,
dislike a lot of. I mean, just like you get these guys like I don't know, VK Jahanam or whatever, who are talking about like 300 different spirits that they like talk to just like every day and just have regular conversations with. It's I don't exactly believe that.
yeah. And
I mean,
well, I believe that
sorry, I'm not.
talking
I wasn't
to
trying to
them,
like
but them
start a
them
drama with
talking
that
back.
guy or anything.
Like I had an experience with an again people because of the it's like I think the entities were telling John B and Edward Kelly and all that they were trying to tell them that there's more than Christianity out there and there's very explicit things that they said and tried to get them to do and they're mentioning even entities from the Goetia and other grimoires show their names show up among the John D's diaries and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but you do operations and operations. So, anyways, I encountered this entity called Vivolti, and it said it was going to come. It's like I can't say that it never came back to tell me this stuff. I just wasn't aware of it. So you get moments of awareness, but it's not like you can just call up anything, hundreds of spirits on list, and they just show up and do what you say and all this other stuff. And some people's imaginations, I guess, can be good enough, but it's like you let that it's like when you visualize the shapes and anything that you're doing that wise, you just let it I just drop it and let it flow. I don't try to just build up my imagination per se. I make that as like part of the ritual, but then I kind of more or less let it drop. And there's a lot of guided meditations and stuff to that effect. But if you just tell, so maybe he's going through list, especially since I don't know what people pay him to do some of those rituals. Some of those people get paid enough for a living, um, but them speaking back is a different thing. But if you listen to him and VK Jehanam in particular, doesn't he give a lot of tarot? Like he flips through in a tarot card or a number that he rolls or something like that kind of attaches to it. So it seems like randomized
Yeah, I mean, again,
association
I'm
stuff.
not trying to. Sorry, I'm not trying to berate that guy or anything. He was just the first person who came to mind when I think about these people who are like, uh, I mean, a lot of spiritualists are like this. It's just like they know every deity on like a name by name basis. They're best friends, and they're gonna tell you all about the wisdom they got. And it's the skeptical side of my brain, just goes
Well,
off
you
immediately
listen, you listen, you
whenever
listen
I
to
hear that kind
most
of
of
thing.
that. Most of that comes off like your typical Baptist charismatic that actually thinks they have a personal relationship, and you ask about the detail, and it just sounds like whenever they think about this, whatever thought that comes up or whatever, they're just going to attribute it that way.
Yeah,
Which
these
which is
demons
which
they
is why
talk
you
to
can which
never
is why you
contradict
can
them in any way.
uh, what?
Oh, just these demons they're talking to never contradict their pre-existing worldview in any way. They're always just there to tell them the exact things they want to hear, right?
Well, the Enochian again, the couple things that I ran into. of course, I'm not, I don't worship I'm not worshiping the angels. That's not what I do with it. I know that's a cosmological presence mentioned in the system or whatever, but I don't pray to the angels of any system. But one of the things about that is like it's entities have sort of derailed my approach to it. Like I expected like to do certain workings forever, and I kind of got the thing. It's like, no, you're stop it with this. And so I stopped using the Nokia keys. I've stopped doing my table meditations, great table meditations, because as at least as solitary practice, because I, sort of get the guidance that that's not supposed to be. Or sometimes I'm told like I have an idea that this is how I'm supposed to go about this. I'll be honest, it's voluntary practice. It's not like whatever, but it's like sometimes you get the idea there, you go about it differently, or something. Sometimes it's something else. They tell you that you're wrong, and maybe you actually figure out in some way you're wrong because they told you that they're wrong. Like, have you ever had an experience that, so because of this dream or vision, you were able to find something by looking it up, and you never could find it by looking it
Yeah.
up?
Yeah.
And that includes type of experiences like out of body. Like, until I started having out of body experiences where you didn't go up, you went down and did other stuff like that, I didn't even know about it. And then I find out and I'm like looking this up. This is really weird. Or I'll look out how I feel, and first of all, it tells me what drugs I'm overdosing on. I don't even use caffeine as an internal thing, but people are, but it will tell me what drugs I'm overdosing on because of the sensual and psychological and emotional reactions that I have in rituals and meditations or whatever. But some of these things I'll like, I don't think I've ever heard of this before. And there it is. Someone else experienced the same thing. And maybe a whole lot of people, maybe a whole culture did. And, you know,
Yeah, I know a lot of times I will like get something and then it's actually the opposite. I'll think I had heard it before, but then I look it up and I realized I did not know that at all before.
yeah,
Or it'll
I'll
be like
find that I didn't even
a
come across.
word.
I'll find I didn't even come across the category, the material.
Yeah. Um, just real again, really quickly, I was actually going to go back
Okay,
before to this topic, but I didn't finish. The what I wanted to get to with JOS wasn't just that there's a lot of like Arabs in their e-group or whatever, which like I don't really care about. It is they have the Blacks for Satan page and gays for Satan, whatever. They don't that's not a contradiction
our
necessarily,
styles of
but
things anyways, like the people that think I'll wear all sorts of different colors, but the people who think you have to have certain symbols and wear black and all that, and that's the Satanist look or something.
no, well, what I mean is race stuff
Yeah.
with them. And the thing is that they deny Andrea Harrington being Maxine Dietrich. They straight up tell you that like there's no evidence and that it was made up by the who, etc. But you go back using the Wayback Machine, not using joyofsatan.org, using their old Angel Fire link, which you can find with enough digging. Go back to 2004. You will find an article where it's called something along the lines of addressing slander against my family. And she says it. She says, I like in no uncertain terms, I am Andrea Harrington. But because her brainwashed forum cult members are told this, they go around regurgitating.
Well, just like one thing
It's